Hey everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. This is Lola. In this video, you are going to learn how to conjugate Dr. and Mrs. VANDERTRAMP, that is the past tense, using the auxiliary of the verb être. I'm also going to include the negative, inversion or interrogative, and inversion in the negative or negative interrogative. So when we do the past tense, if you look at my other video, it actually shows you how you use the auxiliary from the verb avoir. This one is using the auxiliary with the verb être. So we know that most of the verbs go with the avoir auxiliary, but some verbs go with the être auxiliary. So the ones that I'm going to show you today, the way that we memorize this is by memorizing this word, Dr. and Mrs. VANDERTRAMP, and each letter over here stands for a verb that you can memorize. So before we go to that, let's just talk about the three parts that we need to have when we do the Passé Composé. We've got the subject, the auxiliary, and remember this time the auxiliary is the verb être in the present tense. That's what we're using. And we have the past participle as usual as well. So here's the first part, the subject. We've got the singular and the plural forms. Je, tu, il, elle, qui, and on. And on the plural side, nous, vous, il, and elle. And obviously with the subject, it's not just this. It could be a noun as well, something like a person's name. It could be a thing as well. The second part is the auxiliary. And remember, this time we're using the verb être in the present tense. So everything that you see here in red is the auxiliary that you will be using. So, suis, est for all of these, and then sommes, êtes, and sont. The third part is the past participle. So when we learned this in the past with regular verbs, we learned that when something ends with an ER, you replace it with an E accent aigu. So arriver, for example, becomes arrivé, like this. If a verb ends with IR, you drop the IR and you replace it with an I. So for example, sortir will become sorti. And finally, the last one, we have a verb that ends with an RE. So you drop the RE and you replace it with a U. So for example, descendre would become descendu. So these are with regular verbs. But we also have to look at irregular verbs. So out of the 16 verbs here, and there are 16 letters here with Dr. and Mrs. VANDERTRAMP, which you need to know, there's 11 of them here that are regular, and the other 5 will be irregular. So, venir becomes not veni, but venu. Again, remember that initially we think that the IR becomes I, but it doesn't because it's irregular. So it does not become veni, it becomes venu. So this is irregular. The second verb we have is devenir. Again, you might think it becomes devenir, but it doesn't. It actually becomes devenu. And the next one is revenir. Again, you might think it becomes revenir, but it doesn't. The IR does not change to I, it changes to U, so we get revenu. The next one is naître, and naître does not become naîtu, is what you would think, because of the RE ending to U, does not become that, it becomes né. And finally, mourir, an IR verb, does not become mourir, it becomes mort. So you would have to basically memorize these 5 irregular verbs that are in Dr. and Mrs. VANDERTRAMP. Some people also call this Mrs. R.D. VANDERTRAMP, and that's perfectly fine. It's just different ways of learning it. Now we're going to look at all the past participles. So on the side here, we can see it says Dr. and Mrs. VANDERTRAMP, and each letter stands for a verb. And we can see here D is for descendre. It's a regular verb ending with RE, and that RE changes to U. The R is for retourner. The ER changes to E accent aigu. And then we have an IR verb here, sortir, S for sortir, and the IR changes to I. And we can see the irregular verbs here. There are 5 of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So in total, there are 16 verbs, and you need to memorize it. So you'd have to remember that D is either descendre or devenir. M would be either monter or it would be mourir, and so on and so forth. So you may need to add an E or an S to the past participles here so that it agrees with the gender, whether it's masculine or feminine, or the number if it's singular or plural. So for example, if I am speaking about myself and I am feminine and I said, I returned from my trip, I would have to say, je suis retournée, just like this. But because I'm a girl, I would add an extra E here. And if it was a bunch of girls and myself returning from a trip, then we would say, nous sommes retournés. Again, retournés. We would add the E because we're all girls, and then an S because it's plural. So we'll go through some examples coming up. So here it tells you what everything means. So descendre becomes descendu, which means to descend or go downstairs. Retourner means to return. Monter means to climb. Revenir, which becomes revenu, means to come again or come back. Sortir becomes sorti, which means to go out. Venir becomes venu, which means to come. Arriver, which sounds the same. The ending, although it's ER and E here, it's the same sound when you say them. So arriver or arriver, to arrive. Naître, which is né, means to be born. Devenir becomes devenu, which is to become. Entrer means to enter. Rentrer means to re-enter. Tomber means to fall. Rester means to stay. Aller means to go. Mourir becomes mort, and it means to die. And partir becomes parti, and it means to leave. So now we're going to put all 3 parts together. We've got the subject, je, in this instance. It's just an example. And we have the auxiliary, suis, je suis. And I've used the example of descendu. Descendu comes from descendre. We drop the RE and there's a U. So these are the 3 parts, the subject, the auxiliary, and the past participle. Now it says over here to make sure to add an E or an S to your past participle if needed. So we're going to take a look at different situations. So again, we're going to use descendre, and we're going to use gender and number, which are going to matter. So looking at gender, if it is a male that is writing and they're using the verb descendre, which is a regular verb, the RE changes to a U, means to descend or go downstairs. We're going to say, je suis descendu la montagne. So I descended the mountain. I went down the mountain. If it is a female that is writing this exact same sentence, it's going to look a little different. Je suis descendu, and we're going to add the extra E there because it's a female writing this. La montagne. And number, of course, matters as well. So if it's a whole bunch of guys writing this, or a mixture of guys and girls writing this, then we have we descended the mountains. So nous sommes descendus, and we added the S because it's plural, la montagne. And finally, for the last one, if it's just females writing this, then they would say nous sommes descendus with the E and the S, la montagne. We descended the mountain. Now, you'll notice here that we didn't have this before when we did the passé composé with avoir. We never had to touch the past participle. It just stayed as is. But we know that when we use the passé composé with être, with the être auxiliary, anything with Mrs. R.D. VANDERTRAMP, then we need to change the past participle to agree with gender and to agree with number, as we see over here. So if we had to conjugate this, it would be je suis descendu, and I've put the E in brackets because if it was a girl writing it, then of course she would add the E, but obviously without the brackets, I've just put it here because it's a possibility. It means I descended. Tu es descendu, you descended. Again, the E's in brackets in case we're talking about a girl. Notice that il est descendu, he descended, has nothing at the end because it's singular and it's masculine. Elle est descendue has the U and the E because it means she descended. Qui est descendu, we don't know who descended. If it was a girl, we would add the E. Who descended? And on est descendu, one descended. Again, we don't know who that person is, whether it's male or female, so we have it in brackets. On the plural side, we have nous sommes descendus. Now that's for sure there, the S, but the E is only there in case it's a bunch of girls that have descended. Vous êtes descendus. Again, both are in brackets because if you remember from what I've taught before, when you use vous, that can mean one person, even though it's in the plural side. Usually it means a bunch of people, but if you're speaking to somebody out of respect, then you would use vous. For example, if you're speaking to your teacher, you would say, vous êtes descendu la montagne. And you would definitely make that singular if it was one person you were talking to. Ils sont descendus, they descended. And elles sont descendues, they descended. They mean the same thing, except we know that this is just all males or males and females, and this would be strictly only females. So now that was the D that we did for descendre. So I'm going to go through the whole thing with doctor. So the first one was D, this one is R, doctor, and then Mrs. VANDERTRAMP. I'm going to go through each one, but I'm not going to explain each one thoroughly as I did with descendre. You'll see all this over here and you can pause the video and go through it yourself. So retourner is a regular verb. ER changes to E accent aigu and it means to return. Monter is a regular ER verb. ER changes to E accent aigu and it means to climb. Revenir is an irregular verb. The IR changes to U. So revenir becomes revenu, and it means to come again or come back. Sortir is a regular verb. The IR changes to I, and it means to go out. Venir is irregular. The IR changes to U, and it means to come. Arriver is a regular verb, ER to E accent aigu, and it means to arrive. Naître is irregular. This whole word, the RE does not change to U. Naître becomes né, and it means to be born. Devenir is another irregular one, IR changing to U, devenu, and it means to become. Entrer is regular. The ER changes to E accent aigu, and it means to enter. Rentrer is another regular one. ER changing to E accent aigu, and it means to re-enter. Tomber is a regular one. ER changing to E accent aigu, and it means to fall. Rester is a regular verb, ER changing to E accent aigu, and it means to stay. Aller is another regular one, ER to E accent aigu, and it means to go. Mourir is an IR verb, and it is irregular. It changes to mort, and it means to die. And finally, the last one, partir, is a regular verb ending with IR, so it changes to I, and it means to leave. Now we're going to look at aller as an example in the negative form. So to make a sentence negative, you must add the words ne or an apostrophe or ne and pas or jamais. Jamais just means never. And they surround the auxiliary. So over here in the positive, we see je suis allé au parc. I went to the park, and this is obviously a boy who's speaking because we don't have the extra E on the past participle. To make it negative, that's the auxiliary. So we surround it with ne and pas or ne and jamais. Je ne suis pas allé au parc. I did not go to the park. Je ne suis jamais allé au parc. I never went to the park. And we look at aller in its entirety right here. So je suis allé becomes je ne suis pas allé. I didn't go. Tu es allé becomes tu n'es pas allé, which means you didn't go. And over here, obviously, we have the an apostrophe because the auxiliary starts with a vowel, with an E. Il est allé becomes il n'est pas allé. He didn't go. Elle n'est pas allée. Qui n'est pas allé. On n'est pas allé. Nous ne sommes pas allés. Vous n'êtes pas allés. Ils ne sont pas allés. Elles ne sont pas allées. Now we're going to look at the verb aller in the inversion form or the interrogative form, which just means that it's a question. So to make a sentence a question, you just need to invert the subject and the auxiliary. So here's our subject, here's the auxiliary, and we're just going to flip it. And then we're going to add a dash in between and a question mark at the end. So tu es allé means you went. Et tu allé means did you go. Here's another example. Elle est allée means she went. Notice that we added the extra E because we're talking about a girl. And we're going to flip these two so it becomes est-elle allée? Did she go? So now we're going to look at aller and conjugate the whole thing. So je suis, flipping it, becomes suis-je, and then aller. Did I go? Es-tu allé? Did you go? Est-il allé? Did he go? And then, of course, we have est-elle allée? Est-on allé? Sommes-nous allés? Êtes-vous allés? Sont-ils allés? Sont-elles allées? Now we're going to take a look at aller in the inversion form in the negative or negative interrogative. So to make a sentence negative in the inversion negative interrogative form, you must add the word ne or an apostrophe before the auxiliary and the pas or jamais after the subject. Let's take a look at it now. So we have suis-je allé. We're going to put the ne before the auxiliary, and the pas is going to go after the subject. Je ne suis-je pas allé. Did I not go? N'es-tu pas allé? Did you not go? N'est-il pas allé? Did he not go? N'est-elle pas allée? N'est-on pas allé? Ne sommes-nous pas allés? N'êtes-vous pas allé? Ne sont-ils pas allés? Ne sont-elles pas allées? And that's it. So thank you so much for watching, guys. Hopefully this was helpful to you. And if it was, please give it a thumbs up and please subscribe to my channel. Thanks, guys.